Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our discussion around the two questions you absolutely must answer when planning your succession. Hey, it's George Hartman here, and I'm delighted to be with you today. I do see a number of past clients and other familiar names on the registration list, so thanks for joining us. But whether you're an old friend or someone new to our network, because you are here, I'm assuming that you are at least thinking about your eventual, but let's face it, inevitable exit, transition, succession, retirement, whatever you choose to call it, from the business to which you have spent so many years building. And congratulations, by the way, on taking this important step to prepare yourself for that day, whether it's 12 months from now or 12 years from now. As you know, there's a lot of talk in the industry today about exit planning. What does surprise many people, however, is the fact that the whole topic of succession planning is relatively new. For example, I spent my career in both the insurance and investment industries, and during that time built 3 books of business as I moved around, but I never sold one of them. In those days when it was time to move on, you simply walked down the hall to another advisor whom you trusted and asked them to take care of your clients. And if they really appreciated the gesture, they might take you out for a nice dinner or buy you a great bottle of scotch or something. Today, however, it's a different story. With an increasing demand for high quality businesses, many are trading hands for millions of dollars, in fact. What worries me, however, are the thousands of advisors who have the majority of their personal wealth tied up in their small to medium-sized businesses. And moreover, they're counting on the sale of those businesses to fund their own retirement. Unfortunately, many are going to be tragically disappointed because they waited too long, they planned too little, or they assumed too much. But it doesn't have to be that way. Putting together a sound succession plan follows the same path that you use when planning clients' retirement. Number one, you take stock of where you are today. Number two, create a vision for the future. And number three, develop a roadmap to take you from where you are to where you want to be. So my objective today is to help you with your succession planning by considering some of the key questions you must answer. And I base these questions on over 30 years of coaching top performing insurance and investment advisors and exiting dozens of practices. 3 of my own, as I mentioned, but many more vicariously, of course, through my coaching clients. So let's get right into it. And let me share my screen if I could. And let's get to it. I promised that I would share with you 2 major questions that you have to get right to maximize the potential outcome of your succession plan. In fact, however, there are many, many questions. And here's a quote from one of the recent graduates of our Succeeding at Succession program. And he said, "I was pretty sure I had all the answers regarding my succession. What I soon realized, however, was that I didn't even have all the questions." And that is the truth. Planning and executing a successful exit strategy is a complex and at times overwhelming task. But if I titled this webinar 101 Things You Need to Know About Succession Planning, I doubt that most of you would have shown up. So for that reason, I have taken the multitude of questions and organized them into 2 really big ones. And if you can develop confidence that you have the right answers to all the smaller but essential questions that underpin the big ones, your chances of having the succession outcome you want will be improved many times over. So what are the 2 big questions to be answered by anyone contemplating their exit? Question number 1 is, am I ready to exit my business? Am I ready to exit my business? And question number 2, is my business ready for me to exit? So the 2 perspectives from your personal self and then to the business. So my objective is to help us find the answer to those questions. And to give us some context, I am going to reference the 6-step succession plan as we use it in our Succeeding at Succession program, which if we have time at the end, I'll be happy to tell you a little bit about. So the 6 steps, as you can see, are number 1, to be prepared financially. Number 2 is to get ready emotionally. Number 3, ask you to determine your timeline. And the reason we do that is a few advisors circle a date on a calendar and at 5 o'clock on that particular Friday afternoon, hand in their keys and walk out the door. It just doesn't happen that way. Unless they're forced to by fate or circumstance, most advisors exit over an extended period of time. So therefore, steps numbers 1 through 3 are about determining if you are ready to exit your business. Step number 4 is to select the exit option best suited to your objectives. There are at least 6 exit strategies that are popular today. Number 5 is to choose a great successor, because you can't have a great succession unless you've got a great successor. And number 6 is to implement when the time is right. So steps 4, 5, and 6 then are about deciding if your business is ready for you to exit. Let's look at each of the steps in a little more detail. Number 1, preparing yourself financially. Now, you would not expect that being financially able to retire to a lifestyle you want would be a challenge for veteran advisors. Unfortunately, I can tell you from 30 years of coaching that many advisors have not done as good a job of accumulating wealth for themselves, particularly outside their business, as they have for their clients. All right, so let's take a look at what I mean. Now, I've come to call step number 1, measuring your financial freedom to exit. And we can plot it on a continuum that runs from low to high. At the low end of the spectrum are advisors who are not likely prepared financially to leave their business. And that's because they have little or no outside investments. Their lifestyle fluctuates depending on how well their business is doing. And through methods that we all know about but don't practice, I'm sure, their business pays a lot of their personal expenses, and they're fully counting on the sale of their business to fund their retirement. Now, further up the scale, in a better position, are advisors who are more likely to achieve the retirement lifestyle that they desire. That's because they have some personal assets to add to the proceeds from the sale of their business. Their business today more than pays for their current lifestyle. They don't have great financial needs, and they're really only counting on the sale of their business to fund part of their retirement. And finally, advisors at the top end of the spectrum are in the enviable position of having substantial personal assets outside their practice that they can convert to retirement income. The sale of their practice isn't going to affect their lifestyle, and what's more important to them often than the money is being sure that their clients are well cared for. So I'm going to ask you to just stop here for a minute, half a minute, and think about this and ask yourself, where are you on the financial freedom scale? Low, medium, or high? Which one best describes you? And how does your position on this continuum influence your exit plan? Okay, you can think about that some more. I want to move on to step number 2, being prepared emotionally, by acknowledging, first of all, that the emotional aspects of leaving your business are often the most difficult to resolve. And that's understandable. If you spent 20, 25, or 30 years or more building a great practice, it's not easy to just hand it over to someone else and walk away. There are, as I indicated, many questions that have to be answered to convince yourself that A, it's the right thing to do, and B, that it's the right time to do it. So step number 2 is about your psychological readiness to exit. And I call this your emotional enthusiasm for leaving. As I noted, this is one of the most complex issues to be resolved. And one way you can get some guidance on that is by asking yourself some deep questions, such as, if your business energizes and motivates you, how are you going to replace that feeling? Can your ego handle the reduced relevance if you're no longer the voice, the face, the principal character, the decision maker in your business? Will you be okay with someone else advising your clients? Let's imagine this. 6 months after you retire, you're walking down the street and you bump into one of your former clients. And after the chit chat about your first 6 months in retirement, they say to you something like, you know that person that took over your business? Well, they want me to do this. And then they go on to describe some change in their investment strategy or their insurance program or their financial plan that you might not agree with. How would you react? Would you say something like, well, you know, I chose Bob or Mary as my successor because I have great respect for them. They're very well experienced. They're very interested in doing what's best for their clients. And, you know, I think that over 6 months, they've probably gotten to know you pretty well. and perhaps you should listen to their advice? Or would you say, hell no, I'm not going to let them get away with that. I'm going to call them up right now and tell them to stop? How would you handle someone else doing your job? And here's another consideration. Pardon me. As you know, being an advisor can bring its own excitement. This is a fun place to be, this industry. Will you miss the pulse and the action-oriented aspects of the business, watching the markets and the politics and the economy and all kinds of things? There's also the good possibility that as a successful business person, you enjoy some stature in your business, in reputation in your community. What if that profile fades away and you're no longer the head of a successful business and recognizes that? And how about the people aspect? How will you feel not seeing your staff every day and your clients on a regular basis? And then there is the really big one. Once the afterglow of retirement has faded, after you've played enough golf or sat on enough beaches or spent enough time traveling the world, what are you going to be doing with your time? Now, in the same way that we plotted financial freedom on a continuum, we can measure emotional enthusiasm from low to high. On the low end are those advisors who are totally defined by their business. Now, this is almost an existential question, isn't it? If I'm defined by my business and I no longer have my business, then who am I? What's my purpose in life? Or those advisors who feel that their business couldn't survive without them. Now, this is symptomatic of bigger issues in their practices, but from a succession readiness perspective, it does not bode well. Or how about those who couldn't live without all the perks that come from owning your own business? And as we mentioned, the recognition of your success. And then, of course, who have no idea of how they're going to spend their time if they didn't have to deal with their business every day. Now, a little higher up the scale, again, we find those advisors who do have a life outside their business and they'd like more time to pursue other interests. They feel that they've got a good team in place to ensure that their clients continue to be cared for after they exit, and they're generally happy with what they have accomplished. And finally, at the high end of the scale are those advisors who can't wait to get out of the business, but we hope this is a positive sentiment because they have something else they would like to pursue with the same passion they used to build their business. Generally very proud of the accomplishments they've achieved and the legacy that they will leave, and probably feel that their next greatest contribution could be to coach or mentor their successor. So again, let's stop for just a short period and ask yourself, as we did with financial freedom, where are you on the emotional enthusiasm scale? Low, medium, or high? And how does your position influence your thinking about your exit plan? Okay, now here's where your level of financial freedom and emotional enthusiasm come together. I put them in a matrix because that's an easy way for me to represent them, and I love matrices. On the vertical axis, we measure emotional readiness from low to high, and on the horizontal axis, we plot financial readiness from low to high. Advisors in the bottom left corner are not prepared either emotionally or financially to exit their business. Now, this quadrant is intentionally colored red for danger. Of course, this is where we all started in the business. However, it's a tricky place to still be if you're contemplating retirement after a lifetime of building your business. Advisors in the upper right quadrant, colored green for go, however, are both emotionally ready and financially able, basically to do whatever suits them. The other two quadrants are colored yellow for caution. Advisors in these two quadrants are prepared on one dimension, but not the other. Advisors in the top left corner are prepared emotionally, but not financially. Now, recall me saying that there are many advisors who want to retire, in fact, some quite desperately, but they simply would not be able to enjoy the lifestyle that they've created through their work. This is where those folks hang out. Advisors in the bottom right quadrant are actually in a pretty good place. They have the financial capacity to retire, but are just not ready emotionally. Perhaps they're searching for the right successor, or they want to mentor whomever they choose, or maybe they're just not yet sure of how they're going to spend their retirement years. Let's move on to step number 3 then, determining your timing. Now, as we talked about Your financial readiness will have a big impact on when you begin your transition. For example, if you need more time to accumulate more wealth outside your business, or you want to increase your business's value prior to offering it for sale, or from an emotional perspective, if you need more time to adjust to the idea of leaving your business, or if you simply want a longer ride for whatever reason, maybe you're just having too much fun. This graphic illustrates a number of the major factors that could influence your exit timing decision. We've already talked about financial and emotional readiness. However, there are other considerations, such as your health. Is your health at risk to some extent, so that it might make sense to retire sooner rather than later? Or do you have ambitions in retirement that require your health to be in great shape, and so on? How about the momentum in your business right now? Is it growing or plateauing or even declining? If it's growing, you may not be anxious to leave. If it's plateauing, you might be wondering. And if it's declining, you might be anxious. So we got to know what's happening inside your business. How about your progress in finding a qualified successor? I'll have more to say about the difficulty of doing that later on, but are you down that path already? And then how about the market appeal of your business to potential buyers? Practices increase in value to a point, and then they start to deteriorate or diminish in value as clients age and they stop investing and they stop planning and they start drawing down assets and so on. So you can pass the peak value of your practice. So given all of these decisions around financial, emotional readiness, your health, the momentum of your business, and your successor and the marketability of your practice, how do you decide this is the time? Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but I'm going to make it actually easier for you by asking you to pick not one, but 2 dates. And as we said, most advisors don't circle a date on a calendar and that's it. But the first date I like to refer to as the earliest possible date. Now, we're not saying that you would retire by this date, only that you could if you had to. You may not have the ideal retirement lifestyle that you visualize because you haven't accumulated enough wealth or whatever, but you could have one that was good enough. Now, the earliest possible date you will be ready to exit is likely to be influenced by your financial position more than anything else. In any event, we hope that you will have a completed succession plan by this date and your successor engaged to some extent in the process already. We call the second date your latest acceptable because it's more likely driven by your emotional readiness than your financial position. What you're saying here is that I want to be out of my business by this date no matter what. Well, that might be a little bit strong because something could come along, compel you to stay in the business long after your intended retirement date because you feel you have no other choice. However, I think you get the idea. This is where you should also consider all those other factors that we mentioned earlier, your emotional readiness, your health, the momentum and marketability of your business, your post-retirement interests, and of course, your family's desires. Families have a big play in retirement planning in this case. Just to go back to this for a minute. So what I'm asking you to do here is basically to metaphorically drive 2 stakes in the ground. One is your earliest possible, and the other is your latest acceptable. And this will give you a time frame for your planning. So a common example would be, my earliest possible date is 3 years from now. My latest acceptable is 5 years from now. And note that neither one of these dates are chiseled in stone, so to speak. If any of the factors that influence the timing of your exit or transition change, you should, of course, revisit your decisions around that. Okay, I jumped quickly ahead, but let's get to selecting your exit option, step number 4 in the 6-step succession plan. And here I want to bring back that financial emotional readiness matrix. So bearing in mind where you placed yourself on the matrix previously, let's look at some high-level, and I emphasize high-level strategies for your transition. Bottom left corner, low emotional and low financial, a tough place to be when contemplating your exit. And your options, quite frankly, are limited. You can continue doing what you're doing and not be happy about it. You could sell out at a low value, or my favorite, put your head down and go hard at boosting the value of your business so that you can move out of this quadrant. Top right corner, green, what can we say? Lucky you. As we noted earlier, you have all the choice in the world. So if you're in this quadrant, lucky you, ask yourself this question: given that I have no limitations, what is the ideal way in which I would like to transition out of my business? What would I like my legacy to be? Top left corner, yellow, put a ribbon on the pig. Now, that's a little bit crude, I understand, and I don't really mean it to be. What it actually represents, and that kind of approach, putting a ribbon on the pig, is an extreme action for anybody that's in this quadrant. Basically saying that if you are very serious about wanting to exit the industry, tart your business up a bit to make it more appealing to a potential buyer, and then sell it to the highest bidder. It will be better for your emotional state and probably better for your clients if they are transitioned to someone else who has a more optimistic view of the future. Now, as I said, this is an extremist view. Let me tell you what actually happens with many advisors who do find themselves in this position. They go to work to make the business more attractive to a buyer. They do things like cleaning up their client base, reducing the number of products or positions they hold, tidying up their records, even painting their office. And guess what happens? As a result of doing those things, they become more efficient, more effective, more profitable, and their business starts to become more fun, which in turn causes many to decide, hey, you know what, this is better than I thought it could be. I'm going to stick around for a little while. And they might extend their retirement or exit date longer than initially intended. I think that's a real positive outcome, by the way. And then finally, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have those advisors who are financially able to exit, but not yet ready emotionally. And as we said previously, this is a good place to be because you have the luxury of time on your side to find the right successor, to engineer a great transition, and to fine-tune your legacy. And what we often find with advisors in this quadrant is that as they continue to work to put their business in the best possible condition, they begin to move closer to the top right quadrant of the matrix. And hence the reference in this quadrant to the Buddhist saying, hasten slowly that you may soon arrive. So bearing in mind where you are on the financial emotional matrix, what is your best high-level strategy for executing on your succession plan? So having looked at that high-level options then through the lens of the financial emotional matrix, let's get more specific about the most common ways advisors approach their transition. There are basically 7 different methods. I said 6 earlier. I'll tell you what the 7th is. Do nothing, carry on, partial exit, internal transfer, sell and stay model, external sale, and 7 is some variation on numbers 1 to 6. That's what we find in the real world. Let me describe option number 1, to do nothing. And it's not always an option. When you're faced with a decision regarding potential change, to do nothing, to ignore the issue, to wait and see what happens, if anything. If it doesn't, so what, right? The big advantage to this approach is that you don't have to create one of those darn succession plans, which is why I also like to call this the die in the saddle plan. You know, I'll just keep working until I can't work no more. Or until someone comes into the office one morning to find you sitting in the same position you were in when they left the day before, wearing the same clothes, not moving and not breathing. Think that is unlikely? It isn't. We know of an actual experience where that is exactly what happened. And I'm sure there are many similar stories. The disadvantage to this option, of course, are ominous. The obvious chaos that is likely to result in the event of an unexpected death or even a serious disability like a stroke or a heart attack. And that chaos may result in the need for a quick sale of the business, whether to provide for financial needs of the family or to prevent the otherwise inevitable erosion of practice value as clients either leave or are swept up by other advisors. So, in other words, you would be leaving, in this particular option choice, your exit to fate and circumstance. This doesn't seem like a really sound planning process. Option number 2 is to carry on. It's actually a variation on option number 1, which, if you'll allow me to stay with the cowboy theme, I call riding off into the sunset. You know, the movie scene where the hero just slowly rides away on his horse, getting smaller and smaller as he gets further and further from view until eventually he disappears completely. That kind of reminds me of advisors who tell me they're just going to keep working on their business as it slowly declines around them. No new clients, dwindling assets, no new opportunities, and so on. These are the advisors who say to me, well, I'm just going to live off my trailer fees until they run out, and then I'll quit. The carry-on option has the same advantages as option number one, in that you don't need a succession plan, so don't waste time on one. But here's another less obvious advantage. Sometimes it is actually the best approach, because at the end of the day, it will put more money in the advisor's pocket. How so? Well, we run into practices that are already well on the downward trend toward their eventual and inevitable dissolution. Revenue's falling, clients are leaving, advisors not making any effort to stop the decline, which makes the business obviously less attractive to a prospective buyer. And in those instances, we may well suggest that the advisor just ride it out. Yes, their income will steadily decline year over year, but if they can continue for another 2 to 3 years, they will likely receive more total income than they would get through an immediate sale. The disadvantages are also clear. There, of course, is the uncertainty, which causes a number of issues. First, you may work well past, as I mentioned earlier, the peak of your practice's value to maximize the price that you could receive for your practice. And if clients are not confident in your long-term plan, they may leave, which will further accelerate the decline of the business. And for sure, referrals will disappear. No one is going to recommend an advisor whose future is that uncertain. All right, option number 3, the partial exit, is the most popular one, by the way, and it certainly does have some merit. Under this approach, as you're probably familiar, advisors plan to sell or transition part of their book of business to someone else so they can continue to serve a smaller group of their favorite clients. Now, there are advantages to this strategy. First, it allows advisors who are not yet ready to fully retire to keep their hand in the game, so to speak. Second, they can choose the number of clients with whom they want to continue to work. And finally, they get to be selective about the clients they want to continue to advise. Most often, they will choose the clients they enjoy working with the most, which coincidentally are often the practice's biggest clients. The major disadvantage is that the group of clients retained by the founding advisor often represent all of the practice's profitability. So if the founding advisor takes the top clients away to become their new mini practice, they're taking the most profitable clients and basically ripping all the value out of the rest of the business. And that can pose real problems for the successor, who is now left with the business's less profitable clients, perhaps limiting their ability to do the important things to revive the business following the stripping out of its most valuable clients. And finally, the clients that you don't choose as the few who are going to go with you to continue working along with you may feel that their loyalty is unappreciated to the point where they leave, which may affect any client retention assumptions that are built into the terms of your deal. And that can actually cost you significant money. Okay, on to option number 4, the internal transfer. This is the preferred choice because it has advantages for everyone: clients, the successor, the dealer firm, and of course, the departing advisor. Internal transitions are usually the easiest to arrange. There's less disruption for clients and staff. It's basically business as usual, just with a different advisor or advisor team. And from the selling advisor's perspective, the due diligence process is also much easier if their successor is from the same firm. However, even an internal transfer has its disadvantages. And the biggest one is the lack of a good successor. Now, advisors tell me that the number one challenge they have when they're looking around for a successor is finding a qualified candidate. So they'll say things like, there isn't another good advisor within 150 miles of my office, or all the other advisors I know are older than I am. That's not a good successor profile. Or I don't know anyone with the knowledge and experience I think they need to serve my clients. Or how often have I heard this? My business is too big and no one around here can afford to buy it. And they also could also be true that if you work in a large organization, a branch office, for example, with a number of advisors, you could end up with a cat fight among advisors jockeying to buy your book of business. Competition becomes fierce when a good book of business comes onto the market. And there is also the tendency when transitioning internally to offer what I'll call favored pricing to the person that you really want as your successor, meaning that you will not receive full street value of your practice. It may also be that your company has some formula according to which you are supposed to, or must in fact, transition your business. All right, option number 5 is relatively new. We call it the sell and stay approach. It has appealed to those advisors who aren't ready to leave the business, but recognize the value of their practice may have peaked and they want to cash out before it diminishes. They recognize that it is currently a seller's market where demand for good books of business is the highest it's been in years. And that, of course, translates into buyers being willing to pay premium prices. Secondly, buyers, if they require financing, have more access to money to buy a practice today than they ever have in the past. Another advantage to the sell and stay option is that you can often create the ideal job for yourself. Anything from managing client relationships to mentoring other advisors to being the rainmaker, or even the CEO who manages, or COO rather, who manages the business instead of managing client accounts. And we've had some advisors we've worked with who've taken the CEO position. They've sold out most of their equity interest, but continue to run the business. On the disadvantages side of the ledger, there is the potential challenge to your ego of no longer being in charge. How would you handle the "you're no longer the boss here" response to something that you criticize in your successor's decisions? And that, of course, can lead to friction and ongoing tension between the selling advisor and the successor. Okay, finally, option number 6, the external sale. A lot of people talk about this, not so many actually do it. It's of interest, of course, because it offers a couple of potential advantages. Number 1, it opens up the entire market for successor candidates. It's less likely you'll have, if you've got the whole community to choose from, that you would not find a good successor. Secondly, with the demand for books as high as it is, you would likely have numerous potential buyers, leading to multiple competing offers that will push your price up. So what's the downside? Well, by definition, an external sale is a sale to a competitor. And for some advisors, that is simply not acceptable. Another disadvantage is that selling externally is a lot of work and typically requires the greatest effort by the selling advisor to put all the pieces together. The due diligence process, of course, becomes much more important and extensive. And finally, an external sale is the most disruptive for clients who may have to be repapered, sell out of some proprietary product positions with tax consequences, and so on. And staff, of course, will be wondering about their seniority and security in the new practice to which they would be transferred, hopefully. So now we are at step number 5, choosing the right successor. And it may be that you've already picked the person you want to carry on. And in fact, they may already be well entrenched in your practice and poised to take over when you say go, and that would be a good thing. Alternatively, you may just be starting to think about who might be the right candidate. Regardless of whether it's someone you think is already there or someone under consideration or someone you haven't met yet, they all should pass serious scrutiny. So what makes a great successor? Well, just before we get to that, let's talk about some aspects of choosing your successor that we would prefer you avoid. First, note that choosing a successor doesn't mean choosing a mini-me of you. In fact, it may be better if they aren't. You want someone who can take what you have built and elevate it, not just maintain it, so they could well be different in a number of ways. And that's not to say there definitely shouldn't be commonalities. Just don't assume that the best candidate will be a copy of you. And second, just because someone has always been assumed or assumed themselves that they would be your successor doesn't mean they have to be. We've had several recent examples where exiting advisors, in planning their succession more carefully, have determined that they had the wrong successor in mind all along. So, what should you look for in a great successor? Well, as we said earlier, you don't want them to be just like you, but there are some essential commonalities. Number one on my list would be strength of character. It's a given in our industry that advisors always act with integrity, professionalism, and commitment to clients. So I would want to make sure that any successor candidate I had met those qualifications. I'd want them to be smart in business. In my view, that acumen comes from two sources. Number one, experience. So I'd want them to have good, solid experience in our industry. And as importantly, if not more, common sense. The willingness to make tough decisions and the ability to get things done are things that I'd like to see in the person who would be leading my business when I exit. And speaking of leadership, the ability to motivate others, to influence behavior, and to gain cooperation, I think would be pretty essential in an industry that is as dynamic as ours is. Now, moving to the personal side, the fit at a personal level, I would want someone who shared my values, my beliefs, my attitudes, for example, towards the good work that a financial advisor does. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to go to the same church as your successor, but for example, do you both believe in the value of financial planning or in a buy and hold strategy or in a different the treatment of clients? Do you agree that client interests always come first, even if it's going to cost money? And similarly, are you aligned philosophically at a professional level? For example, about how clients are going to be serviced. What's the level of commitment to service that you're going to make? What type of products would you recommend? What processes are you going to follow to determine what are the right products and so on? And that brings us then to culture. If you, for example, have created a culture of casual openness, staff independence, client friendliness, if your successor is someone who insists that they're going to run a tight ship and fix all those things, that may foster a different reaction from clients and staff than you want. I'm not saying that changes aren't permitted once your successor takes over. In fact, that may actually be one of the reasons you've chosen a particular person, because they're going to bring needed change to your business. Just be sure that any radical departure from what people are used to doesn't put them at risk of leaving after a transition to someone new. And now on to a very important issue and a frequent question. Should I choose a family member as my successor? And the first answer for many people would be, well, of course, if you can. It's the entrepreneur's dream, and that would be understandable. But is it always the right thing to do? Let's look at some of the special considerations. The first criteria, in my view, for a successful family transition is that the intended successor does not feel he or she is obligated to accept that path for the rest of their life. Let me share a true story to illustrate. This is from the life insurance industry, but I think it's very applicable. A few years ago, I was coaching a 30-year veteran life insurance advisor in upper state New York, who, along with his wife and as his managing partner, had built a substantial practice in their community. If you are familiar with the life insurance industry, they were top of the table members. The couple's son, let's call him David, had worked part-time in the family office through high school and college, and in fact went to college to study financial planning and life insurance. After graduation, David's father urged him to join the agent's training program at one of the big firms because he didn't feel that he could offer his son the type of training he needed before joining the family agency. 2 years later, according to a previously agreed plan, David was to leave the big firm to become part of the family business. And I was invited to join in the celebration dinner where David's parents were going to officially make him their business partner. As we neared the end of our meal, David's father got up and launched into a speech about how proud he and his wife were of David, how thrilled they were he was following in his father's footsteps, and how the time had come to have David join the family business as his father's successor. Now, I was watching David as his father spoke, kind of expecting him to show some gratitude for the kind words and some excitement for the future. But by the body language, I could tell it just wasn't happening. He was silent. and had this kind of far away look in his eyes. Now, I'd had numerous conversations with David and his parents about the family succession plan, so I was surprised that he wasn't showing more emotion at the great opportunity being presented to him. So what did I do? I put my coach's hat on and simply asked David directly, David, don't you want to take over the family business? There was a long silence before he answered, no. In fact, I don't want to be an insurance advisor. David's mother was the first to react. But David, she cried, we've talked about this for so long. Oh, your schooling and your training, we've always thought you wanted this. No, Mom, David said, it's what you wanted, not what I wanted. I want to be an airline pilot. Now, as you can imagine, David's parents spent the next hour trying to convince him to change his mind, but he explained that while he admired and was proud of the success they had achieved, he didn't feel the same passion for the business his father had. He respected the work, but he couldn't see himself doing it as a lifelong career. And he went on to describe how he'd found a real joy in earning his private pilot license, and he knew he wanted to go on, and that he'd been pursuing the wrong profession. He wanted to be an airline pilot. Now, our evening ended with everyone agreeing, of course, that it was much better to have had this conversation before David formally joined the business. But I could see the sadness in his parents' eyes that their lifelong vision of having their son carry on the family business had been shattered, and their succession plan had to start all over again. Recall also that David said he didn't share his father's passion for being an insurance advisor. In my experience, there are two dimensions to this. One is the passion for being an advisor, which we all agree is special, right? And the other is the passion for running a practice. Unless you have other specialists within your business, your successor needs to be good at all parts of it. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum are those, whoops, I forgot to type that, are those family successors who kind of take their future ownership for granted. They don't fully value the opportunity being given to them, and in fact feel entitled to take over the family business, even if they are not fully qualified, which obviously leads to some dysfunction in family dynamics. In our experience, however, it is just the opposite. We see great family succession results where the successor gives extra effort and goes beyond expectations to prove that they haven't been chosen just because they're daddy's boy or mommy's girl. And finally, the chances of a great succession are significantly improved if the successor has real skin in the game. All right, and that brings us then to the final step of the 6-step succession plan implementation. This is where the rubber meets the road, to use an old expression, where all your planning comes into focus. There are two major aspects to handing off your business to your chosen successor. One is making the deal, and that's things like obviously determining price, establishing the terms like down payment, payment schedule, closing date, and so on. Dealing with contingencies. What about if one of the parties suffers an illness or in worst case dies prior to the deal being completed, or even shortly after, if there was a transition plan that required the seller to stay around for a while? It needs to be fully documented properly, and then always have a plan B. In my experience, and I said this only anecdotally, at least half of the first attempts at succession do not work out as planned. Having a plan B can save you a lot of grief. Second part is the transition plan itself. Got to think about timing. When does it start? When is the actual date at which someone makes that transition from being owner to being an exiting advisor with some responsibilities? How long is the transition going to last? 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Those are not uncommon terms for the selling advisor to hang around, to work on retention of clients, close up some cases that are open, finish some works in progress, and so on. What roles are people going to play? You've got two advisors there now. You've got the seller and the buyer. Who does what? And what authorities do they have? For how long? When does the transition of decision-making take place? What decisions does the buyer get to make before they've completed the final purchase price, and so on? What about compensation through the transition period? What if there's new business that's developed by the departing advisor? How do they get compensated for that? And so on. And then finally, how do we maximize client retention? How do we introduce the successor to the existing clients so that they will accept them as their new advisor? So there's a lot that goes in behind these two, making the deal and the transition plan. Among the many, many questions that have to be answered, there are some specific strategies for dealing with all of them. So that brings us then back to the conclusion, the 6-step succession plan. And hopefully we have adequately answered questions for you to help you determine, are you ready? Or at least pose the questions that will help you determine, are you personally ready to exit? And then secondly, is your business ready for you to exit? And now, if you will indulge me for just a few more minutes, a word from our sponsor, as the saying goes. The Succeeding at Succession program that I've been referencing we launched it 2 years ago. And prior to that, it was a result of 2 years' work, or we launched it a year ago, a result of 2 years' work on my part, putting everything I know, it's basically a brain dump of everything I know about advisor success and planning into an easy to follow program that takes you on a journey, as I said when we started today, from just thinking about your eventual transition to actually implementing a written succession plan. Let me quickly describe the highlights. Succeeding at Succession is organized into 3 modules. Module 1, get ready. Number 2, get real. Number 2, get ready. Number 3, get rocking. Each module has 3 levels to it. So the course takes us on that 9-stage journey that I referenced earlier, from awareness to action. I am very action-oriented in all the coaching and training that we do. Module number 1, as I mentioned, we call Get Real. It gives us an understanding of the foundations of the succession planning process and the various myths and misinformation that surround it, including practice valuation. This module lays out the groundwork for serious consideration of your exit strategy. Module number 2 helps us understand the extent to which we are prepared, as we've talked about, financially, emotionally, and from a timing perspective, whether that's in view for you now or somewhere well down the road. Module number 2, therefore, helps answer the question, am I ready to exit my business? And module number 3, we call Get Rocking, because this is where things start to happen. As you consider the various exit options available to you, how to choose the right successor, and how to put together a great deal. So this is where you find the answers to the question, is my business ready for me to exit? This is a quick look at the dashboard when you log into the course. It looks something like this. This is a shortened one just to fit it on the page. There are 2 ways in which the course can be accessed. We do have a do-it-yourself option that is completely self-paced. You do have the availability of private chat with me, where you can ask questions about your specific to your practice, or request me to look at your work or seek more information. I'm personally on the end of our digital conversation answering your questions. What I wanted to emphasize today, however, was our group program, which includes everything that's in the do-it-yourself option. It's a little more structured and has some additional features. All right. So rather than just allowing you to proceed at your own pace, in the group program, we release 1 level per week for 9 weeks. Each level contains a number of assignments, which we call missions. That could be watching a video, reading an article, completing a questionnaire, any activity that we think will reinforce your work. Now, a huge benefit that is not in the do-it-yourself version are the live weekly group coaching question and answer sessions, which I moderate, where you can exchange ideas and experiences, share your successes, and seek counsel from other advisors who are also planning their succession. This has proven to be the highest rated aspect of the program by all of our past participants. There's a community chat opportunity as well in this particular thing. And here's something I'm really proud of. A large part of my work as a coach over the 30 years I've been doing this has been separating out what is practical from what is only theoretical, and providing accountability for advisors to take action. When advisors often are asked, what was the biggest value you got out of the coaching that you got from George, they'll say things like, he made me do the things I wanted to do. All right. So accountability is very important. So that's why we created the succession plan playbook, which you complete as you progress through the course. And by the end of the program, you will have a written plan that details your financial capacity to retire to the lifestyle you want, your emotional readiness to exit your business, the lifestyle you want when you get to choose how you spend your time, the choice of exit option that makes the most sense to you, the profile, and perhaps even the name and identity of your successor, the timing of your transition, your role through the transition, the strategy to negotiate your deal, and finally, a statement of the legacy by which you want to be remembered. The most comprehensive, all-in-one, inclusive document that I think, will ever complete. So, why is this course so effective? I'm sure some of you are wondering, couldn't I do all this myself? Yes, you can buy my book, for example. It's called Exit is Not a Four-Letter Word. Sells for about $40 on Amazon. But the answer is yes, you could do it all yourself with the same expected outcome as clients typically get when they feel they can do their own financial and investment planning. What's missing in both instances from the do-it-yourself approach is the expertise, the practical experience, and the emotional guidance that vastly improves the potential for achieving whatever objectives have been set. But let me tell you why I think this program can work for you if you are serious about taking control of your succession. As I mentioned, I've made a career out of separating the practical from the theoretical. So this course is not just theory. It follows a proven path that hundreds of advisors have been down. It's an all-inclusive, integrated, experiential learning process that brings together online training, digital one-on-one coaching, and the community support. As I mentioned, I spent 2 years putting this together, using what I've learned from 30 years of coaching top-performing advisors around the world. It's based on the most contemporary exit planning content and methodologies, and is built on the latest state-of-the-art learning experience platform. We will be using, as we go through the program, the same steps and tools and techniques that we would use if we were working in a full one-on-one coaching engagement that I can tell you would cost much, much more. I have advisors that I've walked through this with, of course, but this is an opportunity to access essentially the same information for a much lower investment. I believe that every practice and every advisor have a unique characteristic about them that requires a standardized process to ask all the right questions that leads to a 100% personalized and customized solution based on the answers to those questions. And that's the way the course is designed. A disciplined, standardized process that leads to a customized solution. So I guess in more simple terms, I think this course provides everything you need to know to exit your business according to your own terms. So what's the deal? Well, the open group, and that's the one I'm going to talk about, the do-it-yourself, you can start anytime, go to our website and register and begin. But the open course, the one where we have the live Q&A sessions and so on, starts in just a few weeks on September the 25th. Runs for approximately 9 weeks. Each week, one level is, as I said, revealed. We also reveal the level after that week, so that in case somebody wants to work ahead a little bit. It takes about an hour a week to go through the self-study, online stuff, including filling in the playbook. It can take a little longer to fill in the playbook, depending on the depth of detail that you want to put into it. What does this have that the do-it-yourself program doesn't have? Well, first of all, we do limit the number of participants in the program to no more than 10 or 12. And we do that so that in the live coaching sessions, everyone has the opportunity to fully participate. That 1 hour session is scheduled at the same time every week. If you happen to miss one of those, then you can easily set up a one-to-one call with me and we'll go through together what was covered. You still have the opportunity for a private chat. You can reach out to me through a one-on-one private chat that we have. I'm always there to respond to your question. And I mentioned my book earlier. Hey, guess what? You get a copy of it as part of the program. Worth $40 on Amazon, worth millions in my view. What's the investment? $597 to register and 3 additional payments of $597 spaced 30 days apart. There's a 20% discount for a single payment of $19.97. But more importantly, you have 21 full days to decide if, in fact, this program is right for you. If you don't think it is, let us know. 100%, no hassle, no hard feeling refund. Tomorrow or the next day, you will receive a link to the full course description and registration, along with a copy of this presentation. You can also email me or call me at any time to discuss whether or not the course is right for you. So here's some quick comments. The course has taken me in a new direction. Thought it was so smart. I've realized how much I didn't know. Course should be mandatory. Redirected my focus to all the things I need to get to retirement. Learned about all the options. Have a different direction. Just decided my successor wasn't the right one. Okay, so wind up with a short recap. The truth is you will leave your business one day. Will it be voluntarily or not? I don't know. The question, however, is will you be in control, or will you let fate and circumstance dictate what happens to the business you've spent your life building? And now I see we only have a few minutes left, but I'm happy to stay around as long as anyone would like to answer any questions. Again, feel free to reach out to me at any time. My email address is george@ultimatepractice.com. That's ultimate-practice.com, but you will be getting notification of everything tomorrow or the next day. So we've got a few seconds left, so I will say my great thanks to everyone who attended and stuck around today. Also to David, as I mentioned, for making this happen, to Ezekiel for dealing with registration, and so on. And I wish you all the best of continued success. Take care.